Welcome all. We got another exclusive interview. We have Hemant Mehta from the Friendly Atheist podcast, former Jeopardy contestant, pretty recent within the last 3 years, if you can believe it. And he
hmm
has founded various organizations, including Foundation Beyond Belief. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cam.
So yeah, I've been a big fan since you guys interviewed. I can't believe it's been this long. During college, you guys interviewed Trace and Frank from Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I
Oh,
was
wow.
just
Yeah,
like,
that was a
I'm
while
going
ago.
that all
Yeah.
right. So I had heard the name because it was coming up in some of the same circles as Young Turks, and it's like
Yeah.
how cool people who actually want to have an actual deep dive into religion and how it's can be corrupted, how it's used in all these
hmm
just infamous real life cases, and how you want to actually keep the dialogue going as opposed to can you believe that what so and so did? And it's just
Right.
been delightful. So I just seeing just so many just talk shows that I've been just fortunate to have you, including FFRF, Freedom from Religion Foundation. It's just
Yeah.
been a delight just seeing how you progressed. They've
Thanks.
had co-host Jessica Graff and company just adding to your material. As of now, what do you look on just fondest from this giant journey you've been on?
It's been interesting to watch the way the atheist movement, I think, has changed over the course of like 20 some years that I've been involved in it.
Hmm.
To go from a group that had very little outside support and just kind of wanted to turn everyone into atheists to a much more powerful force that cares a lot less about deconverting people and a lot more about just protecting. We're playing defense now,
Playing
but
defense, yeah.
there are a lot more allies in the movement. There are a lot more journalists taking us seriously as a force to be reckoned with, and politicians too. So in a way, we've actually expanded our power, even though it feels like we're constantly on the defense.
It's a good. That's very true. Like everyone's now, you're finally seeing mainstream news just finally having to fess up and say we got to use third party sources because we're not telling the actual story and we need to. And it's interesting
Yeah,
how we've had sites like, I think QAnon Anonymous was very highly used by CNN just because so
yeah.
many people were like, I don't know what the hell QAnon is. Well, we if you're going to find out what the hell these bastards are, then you gotta actually look at the podcasts that are studying them for a living.
I mean, isn't that a neat thing that it's easy to find people who have dedicated a lot of time to these very niche sort of things? But that's the thing, like, listen, as if you follow me on Twitter at all, I'm like obsessed in the worst way with like this new independent fundamentalist Baptist cult they have going on. And it's like no one else cares about this stuff. But I promise you, one day these people are going to do something insanely stupid, and then jackpot, they're going to want to know more about them. But this is the true about atheism too. It was a very niche thing, like something you talk about in philosophy circles, academia.
Yes.
It's not a thing everyone discussed because for decades it just didn't make a huge difference. And then when you see people using Christianity through politics to enforce their views, all of a sudden resistance to that becomes more important, and you want to talk to people, reporters, I mean, journalists, anybody. They want to figure out, okay, so what's going on here? And you would know because you have a front row seat to this because you've been criticizing this stuff for a long time. So I mean, in a way, it's like, yeah, we've cared about these issues. We've seen what's coming down the pipeline for many years, and a lot of the groups are well positioned to speak out against this stuff, and they know the players. I look at a site like Right Wing Watch that covers
That's a good one.
a lot of people who, and they just kind of play clips and they say this person was on this podcast or something, but they said this insane thing. And I know a lot of the criticism they get is, come on, these are low hanging fruits. These are extremists. These are not representative of everybody. But then 5, 6 years later, that person's in Congress, that person's in a position of power, and all those clips are still there. And it's like, no, this is what they were doing recently. It wasn't that long ago. And so a lot of times what gets written off as you're going after the worst people or not representative people, it's like, who do you think's gonna be in state legislatures in a few years? It's these people. And that's the reason I enjoy following. I mean, enjoy is the wrong word. That's the reason I care about this stuff, because these are people that I am afraid. I am invested, and I think they are, if not the people themselves who are going to be in positions of power, they're the voices that those people are listening to, and it's good to know what they're thinking.
Man, that's a lot to unpack, but that is the perfect way of summarizing pretty much what's wrong with current news. If it's not current, it doesn't apply until it's current again. It's like, well, you might as well be playing God, so to speak, with the narrative. Is like, it's still a narrative, but you're seeing it with COVID.
I think like
no one wants to talk about COVID, even though COVID's still here. It's not going to work.
10 years ago, I wrote some article. I was commentating. I didn't break the news or anything, but it was about some crazy person who seemed to open up a restaurant that was everyone. It was like Hooters, except everyone has guns. And in an article, the reason it came across my radar is because in an article, she argued, the owner of the restaurant argued, it was totally fine to do, and then quotes the Bible in defense of all that. And the thing is, it would be easy to say, who cares? This is some one person doing something in one town. It's not representative of everything. Then a few years later, that owner, Lauren Boebert, gets elected to Congress. And it's like, no, now you need to care about this person because she has some sort of authority over everybody, or has the power to do stuff over everybody. So again, this is important. I think it's important to follow what these people are doing and saying, because a lot of times most people won't get interested until it's too late. I mean, we saw that with abortion. We're seeing that now with like trans rights getting trampled over.
Yeah.
It's like, it's important to call this stuff out early and often and name the people who are involved.
Get them to so shut that down maybe their Twitter account. So now that
if nothing else, get people to recognize that if you are following this person is spreading odious views, and you should know what they are. I mean, right now in Chicago, where I'm from, there is a guy running for mayor. He's on the ballot. He has a good chance of becoming mayor, who just last year endorsed, or at least said some very nice things about a lady who runs a hate group. And it's like, I'm glad that people were looking out for that stuff back in the day, because it comes into play now.
Half the time you'll see a video and it gets like taken down within 48 hours, even though someone's clearly at said fundraiser.
And you say, I've become a lot of the people who follow that stuff will tell you, you take screenshots early, you take video captures early, because even if YouTube, for example, doesn't pull it down, the people themselves may pull it down before it's too late.
Yep, exactly. Do you think, how much of that do you think is very sponsored by bots? Because like my sister and I were noticing, for instance, a lot of Russian bots were part of Johnny Depp's spreading his hurt on Amber Heard. I know that's a totally different social topic, but we're seeing some of that's worse than even any of the various alt-right groups and Trump and what have you.
I'm sure there are bots spreading some of this stuff, but this is all the more reason that when I'm quoting somebody or screenshotting or whatever, I'm trying to do it from the source. I want to know where the sermon is coming from. I want to know that I'm quoting the pastor accurately and not just some rando on Twitter who happens to say the same stuff, because I don't care about that bot. I do care when it's coming from the pulpit. I do care when it's being spread online, because I'm worried about who might be watching that stuff.
What are the best ways for if you have to save a video? Like, you've done the screenshot, but just for those just doing Freedom Watch out there and any other kind of just like, hey, report this problem. Because like,
I mean, I know on my computer, I mean, I guess it depends what you're asking. Like, the best thing to do is,
without naming a video site, because I don't want that video site to get shut down, for instance, that allows you to download stuff. Like for those that don't have the ability, like they don't know about Google Chrome and looking at the developing
Yeah.
coding and right clicking. What do
Yeah,
you
if you don't
recommend?
have any tech savvy here, but you see something, I mean, I'll give you an example of something that happened today. Someone pointed out to me that there was a police department that was promoting the Bible
I
through their
believe it.
department
Yeah,
on the department's Facebook page. And again, they didn't necessarily know what to do with that information, but they told me about it. And really quickly, it was easy for me to get all the screenshots I needed, all the information I needed,
believe it.
and let a lawyer who does that sort of stuff know, hey, this is going on. I don't know if this crosses a line, but in case it does, here are the screenshots you need in case they ever take them down. And here's the page for the group. So, and again, most of these groups, the way they do it is they collect all the information they need, verify that this is crossing a line, and do their report before they announce it to the world that this is
Right.
going on,
The
because you don't
attorney's
want
office. Yeah,
yeah, you don't want them to take it down or anything like that. You want proof of what you're talking about. So, like, I mean, I save a lot of clips, I save a lot of screenshots for a little while before I publish them, just to see what are they doing with this stuff first. But again, the point is not that everyone needs to be adept at doing that, but if you follow any of this stuff, like I think some of the best tips I've ever gotten as someone who writes about this stuff is from people who just said, my pastor said something this week that struck me as something crazy. Can you look
yeah.
into this? And I'll look at the church. I'll look at the link. If there is something there, I can do something with it. Like, tell someone who you think covers this stuff. Because I think, I mean, speaking for a lot of people who write and cover these issues, that's the sort of thing I thrive on. I like getting those emails. I do get those emails. I do check those inboxes. And it helps when someone says, no one knows about my church. No one knows about this thing that's happening
But
in my
now it's
school
got
district.
exposure. Yeah.
But now it's got exposure. And if nothing else, it's, I have no idea if this is wrong, but can you check? I'm happy to check. Like, please send me that information.
You're kind of you're more than just an activist at this. You're now kind of people are relying on you as the voice of reason, and that's
I hope so, or I hope
gratifying.
at
Yeah.
least they trust, even if you disagree with the atheism thing, I hope people recognize, like, I try not to take cheap shots. Usually it's, look, here's what the person said. Here's the clip. Like, don't be mad at me. I'm just clipping it for you. And if you disagree with my opinion on it, so be it. But I don't think it would be ever fair, and I try to make sure it's never fair, to say I'm misrepresenting any side that I'm writing about, because I try to go out of my way to make sure this is what they believe. This is what they said. I have the clip. I saw the clip, whatever it is.
Have you been noticing? I personally have, and yeah, I should actually take some screenshots of these every once in a while. It seems like there's been kind of an increase in just kind of seeing, uh, like just little smaller groups, ones that are like doing everything from like trolling forums like Democracy Underground and what have you, doing kind of a libertarian version of the Daily Show and other kind of independent so-called thinkers and alt-right
Yeah.
groups who are doing like a send up of, hey, I promote being a conservative atheist. It seems like half the time a lot of these guys are kind of just like just the typical kind of pretender. They're just like they're doing the whole I'm open minded, which is their way of saying I
Yeah.
want anyone who agrees with me. How do we? I don't want to say devalue. Shift through all the bullshit and just like get people to
I
realize
mean,
these are the famous infamous words that lets you know already you're about to waste your time with some, crazy Trumper or flag waving diva who doesn't want any kind of progressive discussion, but definitely wants to enrage you
I
and call
mean,
you a snowflake.
this is always going to happen in any movement, especially one like atheism that's gotten bigger over the course of years, which is there are always going to be a handful of
Imposters.
people who end up, I wouldn't even say, it's not that they're not atheists. It's that they believe stuff that is crazy, or that they do things that I don't like, or anything like that. That's always going to happen. It's going to happen more the larger any group gets. But here's what we can do about that sort of thing. Because, like, you can't stop them from thinking or acting or saying whatever, any of this stuff. What you
Correct.
can do is to make sure that no one is uncritically praising them for that stuff.
Right.
What you can do is make sure, like, people in positions of power aren't lending them any sort of credibility that they don't deserve, that they haven't earned.
Right.
Um, and that's one thing I think a lot of groups have done, where it's like, if I'm just thinking in my bubble,
The
and I
Josh
say this in
Hawleys
a
of the
loving
world
way.
who
Yeah.
promote all this
If you
violence. Yeah.
I've seen a conservative atheist group that said, well, here's the sort of Republican we can get behind because he said something like, I support church state separation. And it's like, before you give them any credit for that, here is the stuff that very legislator has voted for. Here's the
Right.
Christian nationalist legislation they voted for. Like, okay,
They'll
go
only look at
defend
a
that stuff.
segment of what they say, and it's like, well,
Yeah,
so they got your vote, but what about all the other messed up shit? It's on there.
right. Like, own your bullshit, if nothing else.
Own
And
your
that's the thing.
bullshit.
Like,
Yes.
I am not trying. There are several small atheist organizations that promote stuff I really dislike. I don't think the answer is let me misrepresent them or just pick a fight with them online or anything. It's let people know what it is they believe, what it is they value.
Instead
Sure, take
of you guys
screenshots
are
or
all
whatever.
fools. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one's going to win that sort of debate, especially online. But I can make sure that I'll give you an example. This just happened recently. There was a group that's promoting a fundraiser to help ex-Muslims in nations where it's really dangerous to be an ex-Muslim. And that, to me, sounds like a good cause. That is an important cause. I want to help those people because they need more help than someone who's an atheist in America, right? Great cause. That same group said part of our fundraiser is we have a lot of speakers who are defending what the work we're doing. They asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And I looked at the list of who was speaking for their cause. It was a lot of very anti-trans atheists who have spoken out in really bigoted ways. And again, this is where it's my choice, because I'm not going to tell them don't do your fundraiser. But I did say, like, I'm not participating in it because I don't want to lend any credibility to them. So, like, if you want them, go right ahead. I'm not
But you
joining in
lose
on
my
this.
number. Yeah.
Yeah, up to you. I mean, if you think they're more valuable, then by all means, have at it. But, like, I want no part in this. And I can absolutely let groups that I support know, hey, I'm not going to support you if you are going to support them. I mean, I can at least throw my weight around that way. And if they don't care, then they don't care. But, like, I think that's a more powerful way to get at some of these groups. I wish more Christians would do that. If my church is going to bring in this speaker or give money to this group that promotes these awful views, then you know what? My family's not going to this church anymore. And so few of them, I feel, do something like that. And not just because they disagree, because they have other interests in the church that go beyond that stuff. But, like, how much better off would we be if Catholics who supported abortion rights and gay rights, which is a lot of Catholics, said, you know what, I'm not giving money to my church anymore. I'm not sending my kids to a Catholic school because the Vatican, the hierarchy, opposes civil rights. And I don't want to be part of a group that supports that. I'm not even asking them to not be atheists, but stop supporting harmful institutions. You could
Right.
absolutely do that.
Instead of, like you say, adding fuel to said fire, just like
Yeah.
dissecting it all. And like you say, there are some anti-religion political groups who kind of unintentionally resurface and end up becoming part of the very problem that they're critiquing. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're being just as mindless as the mindless followers you're criticizing.
I've said this, by the way, there are a handful of atheists who are very anti-abortion, and they justify that using secular arguments. And the conversations I've had with those people are, well, you are working with these groups that promote misinformation on this, about this, about this, about this. Like, I cannot take anything you are saying seriously, and I would never suggest otherwise. Because look at this stuff that you are suspiciously silent about. You say you only want to care about this from a secular perspective. Well, what about this group that promoted something far beyond what you're suggesting? using the Bible as justification, you're working with them because they want your numbers to say, hey, look, it's not just Christians doing this, it's atheists too. Like they're totally using you, and you don't have the guts to call them out on the stuff you believe they're wrong about. So again, and usually the answer is some bullshit answer. But also they're like, well, we don't have the manpower to do all that stuff that you want. It's like, you have no problem putting out press releases supporting your stuff. Like, go ahead. People would take you more seriously if you called out Christian nationalists who agree with you on a lot of these policies.
Exactly.
But none of them have the guts to do that.
How much of it do you think is just as many followers as I can get, and then saying, well, I guess I'll deal with the hypocrisy later, versus, well, I just now found out about this, but it's too late because now we're bros,
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't happen, if it's not happening when someone has like 2 followers, it's not going to happen when they have 2 million. So I mean, there's not all these groups have big followings, so like it's not going to get better when they have more. I mean, it should be easier now to call out bullshit, if anything else.
You would think. Yeah. So as a cool one of your many feats, you were actually teaching high school in the Chicago suburbs for 7 years. My mother also briefly taught inner city school here in Dallas, Texas. That was, long story short, in the 2010s, made her wonder why she even bothered, because long story short, kids didn't want to learn, and the district managers were deciding, hey, pass everybody, even if they can't do the work at all. And so do you still keep in contact with any colleagues in the schooling industries?
I do. I actually, even though I don't teach at the district I worked at, I should say our district had virtually none of the problems that a lot of my teacher friends have in their districts. I was in a very affluent area, pretty good school district and stuff. I didn't leave because of a lot of the issues a lot of people leave teaching for. So I still have a lot of connections to teachers who work there, the people at the school. I still coach at the school, which is nice. I kind of have at least a leg in. Yeah, I still get to interact with some of the students there. It's great.
I didn't realize that was the same place. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't miss the bureaucracy of it all and the work that goes into teaching, because it's a lot. I like my job now a lot more, but yeah, I still do have ties to that world. I've never left a job I really enjoyed, and that was the first time it ever happened, which is leaving teaching to go into writing. Yeah.
We'll return after these messages.
Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by 4 aging millennials and our outdated opinions. Join us every Tuesday as we discuss movies, TV, games, and even music, new and old.
Dude, what do you think you're doing?
Are you seriously trying to record a promo without us right now?
Well, yeah?
Dude, you can't just do the promo by yourself. Who's gonna listen to that?
Yeah, and you probably haven't even told them that we're a pop culture podcast where we always agree on everything. For instance, the Sam Raimi trilogy, easily being the best of the Spider-Man movies.
No. But I think we can all agree that Jaws is a classical masterpiece.
Nope, don't like that. But we do all agree that the sequel trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the Skywalker saga, right, guys?
That comment is so ridiculous. I don't even know where to begin.
Anyways, that'll do it from all of us here at Culture Shock. Thanks for listening.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR. We add them to our queues. We wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US. We are in the UK. We are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
Run all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Essentially, a lot of people, again, part of why I like podcasts such as yours, and I Don't Speak German, and many of the other great ones is, and I can't speak, well, again, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for some, in that you actually want to have this panel, have it be polished and just as eye-catching as, say, an actual news segment.
Yeah.
And right now, we got various people who, again, just are being led continually astray by Facebook's and other social media's failure to just stop any kind of just hatred promotion and clickbait sites. What do you think is like one of many barriers that we can kind of just put down in that, hey, you know, if you keep spreading this lie-based site or just something that's not even trying to open a discussion, just kind of a slant, so to speak, article, how do you just kind of remind people, hey, it doesn't help anybody? That's the first step. Stop spreading this crap.
Yeah, usually in my case, if someone I actually cared about was doing that, I mean, I might privately message them and say, here's why this is wrong or something, but usually I don't. What I would say is, before I even try to comment and explain why something is wrong, I think the question I would want to know is, if I can prove to you this is wrong, will you care? Because a lot of times,
so ask that before you waste your breath. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if someone emails me because they want to debate, I don't do those debates. I don't care if someone wants to fight me about God, about any of this stuff. But if I were to, like, some rando emails and says, you're wrong about God, I want to talk to you about this, first question I would ask is, okay, but if we have this conversation, I have the right to publish this in full on my site with your name attached to it, because I know you're going to say stupid stuff here.
Right.
And you don't get to, like, just pretend this never happened.
How do I know you're not going to give this to 4 other, you know, anti-atheist sites that are going to say,
or just pretend like you never said this. You never said this stuff
because you took the bait. You know,
and that's it. So I don't go into those debates or conversations if someone is spreading misinformation unless I think there's any value to be gained from that. Because I will tell you, I know someone on Facebook who spreads a lot of misinformation. And what I've noticed is that people went from trying to fight and correct this person in the comments to the point where now no one comments on that person's stuff at all.
They stop.
Why? Because he's not interested in learning what the truth is. So, like, why should we all waste our energy trying to help him? And this is what I feel I've done with the podcast and with a lot of the stuff I write, where it's so not about trying to convince people to become atheists, because I don't think I have the power to do that. Certainly not with one article or one episode. Yeah, maybe. But I think what I'm trying to do is to say, look, if you're a Christian who has a lot of criticisms of the church and might, I hope a lot of Christians who listen to what I'm saying agree with like 95% of it, because I think they should. If you've heard any of the stuff we talk about on the show, it's usually church-state separation matters. And so it's like, well, if you agree with me on that, great, you should, because I'm right. Like, I hope that's the case. And you could still be Christian and agree with everything we are saying here. And then I want you, hopefully, on your own time frame, you start sending out that message. Maybe you change your mind on God, but like, I'm not keeping a tally mark anywhere. I'm not putting a tally mark anywhere. This is on your time. But more than anything, I am trying to convince people who are on the fence or who are, curious about this stuff. I don't care if people are atheists, and I'm not trying to pretend that I'm only speaking to atheists, even if I am speaking to a lot of them.
No, that's a good point, because every other interview I've seen it, and like people just can't get beside that. They are beside themselves. Atheism and thought-provoking discussion. How can you have that? It's like, then you're not ready to have this conversation if you can't believe that there are different barriers and everything.
Right,
how many on some of these other shows have you seen some contrary to the conversation guests come in? Is like, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for all these unusual voices to have. But so many.
I mean, this is one reason I've been able on the podcast to talk to a handful of Christian authors who wrote about some issue that I actually cared about. And one of the reasons I think they're willing to talk to me is I say kind of upfront, if you know nothing about me, I am an atheist. This is a podcast with an audience of mostly atheists. But I want to ask you about, I don't care about your religious beliefs. I want to ask you about these issues and talk about that. And if you're willing to talk to me about it, because I think my audience cares about it, we're going to have a good discussion. And they've been awesome by and large.
1,000%. I still see it growing, and I love how you guys, again, just your whole development team does a wonderful job of just like summing up all the various articles. So we can
the development team is me.
Well, even so, there you go.
And my
One-man show.
co-host. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
But altogether, what do you recommend for any podcaster? Like a lot, like for instance, Crime Junkie and some of the other podcasts did a good job of just noting, like, some of the health podcasts were getting in trouble for this. Like, a lot of people have to remind each other, hey, I don't have the answers to everything, but I'm doing it my best shot. Hence the appeal of this whole podcast. What are like some free tips for anyone who's going to sit down, do some research, especially if they don't have those skills to begin with? What do you recommend?
I mean, if you're the podcaster and you're someone with the platform, then please cite your sources. Tell us how you did your research. That should be a part of explaining what you
spent
found.
on it. I spent a week.
Yeah.
Didn't come up
Why
with anything.
Why should we trust where this information is coming from? Especially, I mean, when it's unusual information. I mean, I'm not saying like the New York Times said this about some subject. I know that doesn't necessarily make it true, but I know how their editorial process works. I mean, I have a reliable trust factor that if they say this is what happened, they got this information. But again, it's explain where you're getting it from and why you trust them. I think that should be any podcaster's thing. And if you're someone who wants to listen, I do think it's valuable. Don't just listen to people you agree with, and certainly not one voice. I mean, listen to a few different people if you're curious about the subject, but then read what other critics have to say. I mean, I think
even
most atheists, I think, that disagree, that criticize it.
That there's even sites that like review all these various interactions that have summed it up for you, and it's amazing how many people won't even make time for those breakdowns.
Back in the day, before the internet was a big thing,
the internet
how
was
did a lot of people be? I know. How did a lot of people become atheists? Maybe they went down a rabbit hole, or at least early stages of internet. They might have read books about atheism, but also they read a lot of Christian apologetics books.
It might have been just,
and in their head, they're like,
or somebody else.
I'm reading this, and I feel like there's a rebuttal here. And then you might read a website or a book where that responds to a lot of those points made. And now you're getting a broader sense of what the arguments are. What are people talking about here? I mean, my news feed, when I'm trying to make sure I'm on top of a subject, I am not just reading whatever atheist sites are left. I read a lot of Christian publications. I read a lot of straight news about what's going on. And I feel like part of my job is to compile that information into something useful for people reading me, to say, yeah, this is what some people are saying, but this is what Christians are saying about it. And if Christians are critical of the same things I am, I think that's worth highlighting. But I mean, trying to point out, like, this is where I'm getting my information from. This is why you should trust me when I say this sort of thing.
Right.
And then making corrections if I need to, and being upfront about, here's what I got wrong. If I do that, I will try to put that straight up front.
Right. Or as a, such and such date, this article just got recollected, but here's 5 other articles that state there might have been political pressure on this front or what have you.
Yeah, or anything like that.
Someone is going with this timeline. We don't know if they're, saving face, what's going on.
Yeah.
And just give all these disclaimers that of a disclaimer, so to speak.
Yeah.
Enhancing the enhancement.
Exactly.
Altogether, what are like 5 other podcasts if you had, or maybe just free? I don't know.
Oh man.
That
no, it's okay.
Check out besides your stunning one, of course, because you're
sure.
You're shuffling into all the Karens and Kyles of the world who also, much like we were talking about with the veterans, just no one's commenting on their posts, but they're still just not taking the hint that, hey, maybe no one wants to hear my bigoted view.
There are a handful of atheist podcasts that I like. I mean, just to rattle them off, I know Scathing Atheist does a lot of news-related things. Okay. The Thinking Atheist is Seth Andrews, who does topic-based shows on a lot of stuff. I'm going to miss a million of them. We Dissent is a really cool one with a bunch of church-state separation lawyers who are all women talking about issues.
That's cool.
But the point is, like, if you like any of the atheist stuff, there's a handful of those. Check them out. See if you like them. I'll be honest with you. I don't listen to a lot of atheist podcasts because usually they all just end up in my feed. I glimpse what they're all talking about and saying. Nothing surprises me. I've heard it before. It's all well and good.
You've already been researching the same article.
They're great if you don't have to do this all the time, which I do. For the work I do. I try to listen to other type of podcasts, usually if I'm out somewhere, interview shows with people I'm interested in. Like there's a great show, American Scandal, which is like not true crime. It's historical things that happened in the past, but told as if it's happening in real time. Like just things to get my mind off of atheism, because I'm doing that like 23 hours a day. So I like using podcasts to get away from that. But also getting good information. You know what I mean? I like getting useful, interesting information from people I trust who have done their homework, and then I don't feel bad consuming that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. You're taking note while you're being entertained versus, okay, and now I got to make time to rewatch, article or videos 1 through 20. That's not happening. So you might as well take it down while you're at. It's kind of like, no one goes to a seminar without a notebook, ready to take note. But you'd be surprised. There will be some people walking in there. I'm like, get out a piece of paper and a pen. How hard is it?
Yeah.
Shoot.
Absolutely.
Altogether, so that's a good summary of just some key sources that I definitely need to check out. Why do you think... I actually saw this in a Mystery Science Theater group, believe it or not. So many dipshits, and I say this lightly, not smartly, quote unquote. Why do so many just seem to think that, much like, again, we want church and state to be separate, but so many of the times people aren't going for that. But there's kind of a similar deal where people think, hey, religion and politics don't intersect. It's like, well, more often than not, they do. So why do you think so many just seem to think, oh, they don't apply to one or the other, they don't affect one or the other? It's like, they absolutely do. Why do you think?
I mean, I can tell you pretty much every day, I can run a big story about a way a religious politician has cited the Bible to do something truly awful.
So many.
I mean, if people want to, if you want to close your eyes, close your ears to any of that stuff, okay. But I mean, the thing I would really like to know is for Christians who share my view that we shouldn't be doing this or who oppose that stuff, I wish more Christian outlets, people with a platform anyway, would use their platform to call out the same stuff. A lot of times the best we can hope for is that they say, I don't do culture war issues. I'm focusing on Jesus. I'm focusing on the gospel. It's like, okay, but you're missing the point. And meanwhile, your congregations are hearing this everywhere else and they're getting radicalized. If you don't have the courage to call it out from the pulpit or your podcast or whatever you use to get your message out, where do you think they're going to hear a voice of reason from? Because they hear from the zealots all the time. And I mean, I think a lot of pastors are just afraid. They think if they call out bigotry, anti-trans bigotry, they'll be called names or their congregation will walk away. And it's like, yeah, so what? That's worth the risk. Go call it out anyway, because it's the right thing to do. And a lot of them are just afraid to do it, so they don't. I wish they would. It would be nice if atheists and church-state separation groups weren't the only people fighting for church-state separation. And they're not. There are plenty of Christian groups that do, but so many pastors, prominent leaders are just silent at best. And that's frustrating.
It's so true. I mean, the Young Turks note how some supposedly liberal politicians often don't want to talk to them. And it's just like,
Yeah,
why?
sure.
We're not here to make you look dumb or anything, but they've had to get into issues with other podcasts that, again, will only slate it a certain way. Is like, no, that guy's claiming to be this and that, but he's really this and that. And
Right.
so why do you think so many just, like you say, have no backbone? They can't call out a pastor
Yeah.
who says a dirty
And I know
remark.
it's not only that they're afraid to do it. Like, again, if your congregation leaves, your church might close, you might lose your career, your paycheck, all that stuff. I know it's a bigger calculation to make, but again, if you're not willing, if your whole thing is we have to be courageous, we have to be fearless because we are Christian, and then you're silent on issues where Christians are causing harm, like, what is the point of anything you're doing?
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
I think to answer that question of a question, it's it's like it's I don't want to say it's so much as bias as it is just like I think they make an exception to the rule and that's where it gets them. That's where someone ends up having to step down or something just because they're just like, oh well, they're bad, but they're not as bad as the rest. It's like, well, no.
Right.
You can't be, if you're gonna now all of a sudden, that's a total twist in the narrative. It's like, well,
Right.
I'm calling out these guys as awful, and I've seen certain. It happens everywhere. Like you see certain people on entertainment gossip crap who take down a story because it happens to affect one of the other hosts. And it's like, well, they're technically a scandal, so what's the difference? You know?
Right.
It's interesting
Right.
how
It's frustrating. I have a lot of respect. I mean, I will say I have a lot of respect for progressive Christians who are very critical and open about what's wrong with their church culture. That's not an easy thing to do. And I disagree. I think they're wrong about the God thing, but I think that's a lower priority than making sure they are calling out bad behavior in the name of their faith.
For sure. Altogether, would you say what's the best way to outline this? Because when someone is doing documentation of any of this material, it's more than just patching up an essay with 6 extra sources to get that A- for your college professor. And I feel like a lot of people have forgotten like the beginning, middle, and end. Like, say what you're about to say it, then say what you just said. And because again, there's so many of the misinformation sites encourage just no voice of reason or anything that how can we encourage people to find constructive voices and lay out all their findings in a coherent manner instead of being shouting?
I'll be honest, I don't think everyone needs to lay out sources. I do think, look, if you care about some issues, don't stop at one person. I mean, no one should listen to me and then think, all right, I'm good. I have my source. No, that's bad. You should, if you care about a subject, and if it's atheism is mine, but whatever anyone's thing is, try to find as many places that talk about these issues as you can and see how they present information and do it over a long period of time. I've said this to people. They're like, hey, do you have a book I can recommend to become an atheist or something? It's like, look, I can recommend some books, but the answer is don't just read one. Read a whole bunch of them, and you should read Christian ones too. And there's no deadline here. You don't have to make a decision by next week. Read as much as you can over the course of time on your own schedule. And you will figure out pretty quickly, like, this person always backs up what they're saying. They always have thought through this issue in a way that seems comprehensive, and they are laying all this information out. I trust them because they're doing the legwork here, as opposed to someone else who's just throwing around buzzwords every day, just kind of aims to get you mad without offering anything constructive. I mean, you'll figure out before long who you can trust, but it's not that you have to do all the work. It's that if you care about it, you should at least put in the time to realize these are sources. This is all the information that is coming in. Some of this is actually good information, and they do a better job of putting out more good information than useless stuff. This group of people constantly produces bullshit. Like, I don't want to listen to this person, or at least I can be critical of this person, but here's where good information is coming from. You'll figure it out over time. And if they help you more than they hurt you, I mean, it would be very easy to get people's attention and clicks with misinformation. There are ways to do it, but if you actually want useful information, figure out who people you trust. Where do they go to? Who do they follow? You know what I mean? Like, you can make your own
follow
little
the leader and then call it out if it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, there are a handful of people I like on Twitter, and a lot of the ways I found other people I like on Twitter are looking at the people I like and saying, who do they constantly get information from? Who are they trusting and relying on? And over time, you figure out, like, okay, this is a good stable of people who, in the long run, give me a lot of good ways of thinking about various subjects. I've learned so much about LGBTQ rights because of people I follow on there, because that's not my usual beat, so to speak, but because I follow people who care about that stuff very much. I learn a lot about those issues, what the conversations are surrounding those issues, what the problematic people are saying and doing, and how to rebut that stuff. I mean, that's how I learn it, from listening to what other people are saying, even if I'm not necessarily echoing them, because it's not my world, you know?
It's so true. It seems like many will just not even follow a single source and just start all over again, or be like, well, I refuse to use this source because I don't agree with the rest of the article, even though, like you say, you can twist it to your narrative.
Right. I mean, this is something that happens on the right all the time, which is like, trust me, I'm your source of truth. I'm the information that you could try. I mean, they literally name their social media outlets that way. And this is why, I mean, just to pick on politics, it's why Fox News gets away with it, because their whole thing is, we're the only place giving you this information you want. Who cares that it's not true? We're giving it to you. Whereas there is no equivalent of that on the other side, because if you want to pick on MSNBC, they do not say we're the only source of good information here.
Right.
They may have some opinion makers and stuff, but like, by and large, it's, hey, this is what the facts are. We have some people who are progressive who have a spin on it, but also, like, you can get the same information from other places, because we're not going out of our way to make up a progressive angle on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to me, that seems more reliable than a group that says outright, we're always going to tell you that
You're
this
full
president
of
is
it,
good.
yada, yada.
Yeah.
If you don't go along with it, you're a traitor.
Right. Exactly.
Sometimes there's been a lot of utter sneakiness, especially as we've seen at various rallies that have turned into violent, just protesting. How can you make out people who are kind of just here to sabotage? Because it seems like that's been going on too. Like various groups have
Yeah.
found out that some people they got are willing to do them harm. Or we've seen even podcasters split up just because they found out, wow, my co-host, who I thought was on the same page,
Yeah.
turned out to be a radical douche. What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't always stop that stuff from happening. You can't always stop that stuff from happening. What you can do is to say, okay, now that I know this has happened, what can I do to prevent it? What can I do to make sure people are kept aware of, like, here's what I'm doing in response? Because listen, there are going to be bad apples everywhere. You can't prevent that. What you can do is say, here's what we're doing in response to that now that we have all the information, because we don't want it to happen again. And we want you to trust us. So this is what we're doing moving forward. Usually, I think if people just say, like, look, this is whether or not it's a mistake or it just happened, how you respond, and if you're upfront and honest about it, I think most people are forgiving of that stuff. As long as it feels honest and sincere, and it's only a problem when that's not the case.
Altogether, what have been some stories, without spoiling any upcoming episodes, that you really got an interesting kick out of? Because it wasn't, not only wasn't the typical kind of material that you have to cover, but you actually felt like the pain would be answered, and you were actually able to answer more than usual because the story felt really compelling.
My favorite stories on the podcast, like, I usually talk about news, politics, atheism. Those are the things I care about. My co-host on the podcast, Friendly Atheist podcast, Jessica, cares a lot more about, like, feminist related issues too. So recently, for example, there was a story where a Christian writer wrote a piece about sex and compared it to Jesus and stuff on a Christian website. And the thing is, not only did he write badly about sex, the way Christians reacted to this, with a lot of people criticizing the callous way he did it, it basically hit every checkbox of things we both enjoy very differently. And so being able to talk about that, which is not a high stakes political issue by any means, but it's definitely one of those things that if you care about our podcast and the stuff we like, you're probably going to like this story. It was a sweet spot of all these things. It's something stupid. It's something with low stakes, but it's all the stuff we love. It's religion, it's sexuality, it's feminism, the treatment of women. And guess what? A lot of Christians felt the same way we did. That was an awesome story. That's the sort of stuff that's so much more interesting to talk about than politician does something horrible, where what is there to talk about other than, yes, that is wrong? I mean, that's not much of a conversation right there.
That's so true. And altogether, I mean, kudos to Jess for being able to find out just so many of these just disturbing pastors and incel groups who are not only just, done the typical corruption, got no shame, and other followers refusing to call him out on it, even though they're supposedly, against shit like that. But, oh, he's the leader, we can't call him out. Oh, he's imperfect, even though I would, if they were on a different side or affiliation, I would totally be uncomfortable with it. And it's just amazing how so many exceptions to all these rules, and there's always a rule breaker who happens to be a rule enforcer. How do you organize the stories though? Like, because you don't want to be out of stories to tell for the rest of the week and let alone month, and at the same time you don't want to be late on it. So how do you organize yourself?
Every single week, we finish off everything. I have a blank slate after we're done with the podcast. And it's usually like, there's like a second of panic of like, oh no, what if we have nothing? Never once have we lacked for stuff to talk about. And usually in terms of organizing, it's always there. I mean, in terms of organizing, it's what do I think will be the most interesting discussion? That's the beginning. And we'll just kind of go through until we kind of feel tired with it. We'll try to aim for an hour discussion, but sometimes things go more or less. But there's never a lack of things to discuss. As long if you care about religion, it's a pretty open-ended thing. There's always something going on.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Altogether, I mean, so one thing that it's hard for people to do with podcasts like this is after all the material is eating you up. So how do you what do you recommend for those who are doing any kind of podcast and just like any school assignment or night job, everyone's different in how they clear their mind, take a break, get a bite to eat while keeping their brain going. What do you personally recommend? Again, I get that everyone's formula is different.
Whatever your hobby is, whatever I because this is my day job, because writing and talking about this stuff is what I end up doing. I try to do a lot of things that get away from that, whether it's a TV show or when it's warmer weather, going out, traveling a bit, getting off the grid, so to speak. I read a book last week that was a novel that's unrelated to any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like whatever you like that gets you away, more power to everybody. I hope everyone has that sort of outlet. I don't care what it is, but it's always nice when people clearly have other hobbies besides whatever it is they do for a living. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's what atheism was when I was in college getting degrees and things totally unrelated. I liked working with non-religious nonprofit groups that were pro-atheist, but also church-state separation and things like that. It's like, oh, this is really neat. I enjoyed this. Turns out I enjoyed it even more than what I was studying to do. And later on, I did that full time. You know what I mean?
1000%. You're all about, again, you want to better everyone's life by telling them about misconceptions. What do you especially recommend for, and I'm not trying to have you spell out every personal secret of yours, but just and tips of the tricks, but altogether you're just very good at just kind of every interview I've seen you in and every sit down that you record, it's been very forthcoming at just not only summing up all the highlights in a coherent manner, but also just illustrating how they are really just not only is this person so full of it that you're summing up, but you're also having to illustrate how the angle at where they're going with their so-called material and everything. So if someone's going to break down one of these conversations, aside from repeatedly rewatch and take multiple notes, how many hours do you recommend people block out for stuff like this? Because some people, they can take them 2, it can take them all day.
Yeah. But, I mean, I'll tell you, are you talking about if we're doing an interview or something?
An interview, a recording session.
I will tell you,
what do you got to block?
There is someone I'm going to interview for our podcast like next week and stuff. So, I mean, I will tell you that my thought process for that is I've seen the work this person's produced and I'll try to come up with my own questions first. I will try to see if they've done any other podcasts or videos or anything like that to see what other people have asked. And I don't want to replicate it. And then if I need to, I can just ask the people who listen to me anyway, hey, I'm talking to this person. What do you want to know? But usually for interviews I do, it's a handful of questions in order of importance, what I really want them to answer. But very much if I don't get to the bottom of the list, that's fine. Because if we end up talking and it goes somewhere else, and that's interesting, let's just go with that. Let's see where that goes. But usually I'm going to try to do a little bit of my homework and make sure I'm not asking questions that they've covered already. And also I want to make sure I'm asking them stuff that my audience wants to know. Because I mean, only once I think has it happened where I thought I did my homework, interviewed someone, and I felt like I was getting no information that was useful or interesting. to the point where I'm like, I don't want to subject anyone to this, so I didn't publish it. Which I felt bad about, but also it's like, if I did, I would have been wasting your time. If I didn't want to listen to it, I promise you, you don't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to make sure, like, no, this stuff is things I want to talk about because they are subjects that I know people care about.
Right. When you're looking for a topic that you see trending, what are some huge indicators other than, whoever's whatever hashtag is trending on Twitter right now, or what Instagram or TikTok videos are being shared? What are some other shortcuts people can use to just know, hey, this is a thing. You're gonna have to spend all day on it, but here, you can tell this
Look
is a
who's
thing.
talking about it. Look who's talking about it. Look who's sharing it. Look at who has a lot of followers who's talking about this stuff. I always want to know that if something's going on online. I will do a search on like Twitter or YouTube and like, what have other people already said about this? Sometimes it's really interesting, or they have a take that I hadn't thought about, and I want to make sure I'm incorporating that with credit. But sometimes it's like, you know what? I thought this was a thing, but it seems like either no one's talking about it, which is reason I should, or it wasn't as big of a story as I thought it was, because really all the controversy stems from a couple of nobodies just kind of screaming out into the wind. Maybe this isn't a big deal, and I don't need to make that flame grow larger. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So yeah, you can always look at who's talking about these issues too.
It's very true, especially when you're already having to separate, detail this bad apple, for instance, who's wasting a bunch of people's time, lying to them, and has a political scandal, versus this person is talking about this stuff, but it ain't. If you were to report them, then you're giving them a bigger voice when
they're
really not all that big. They're a beginning level. We're talking. You should spend more time, for instance, on the professional crook versus the amateur crook who's beginner.
Right.
The one who's not a very good burglar versus the one who has scammed, Bernie Madoff level heists, where you're like, okay, that guy's getting attention even though he doesn't deserve it because he has wronged so many people. We owe it to everyone else. Versus this guy who he's a troll, but he's barely even trying to troll. So why even, bother with his bullshit?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Altogether, again, the stress of this, the annoyance of this, the hatred of all this bigotry can eat anyone up. So how does one just learn to realize, hey, this isn't going to kill my humanity when I cover all these shitheads? What do I do?
No, it's a good question, and it's hard to answer.
Some people do a hot shower or just walk around the block.
I know. I feel like I've grown numb to a lot of these stories, even as horrific as they are. But again, this is where having that outside hobby. Oh yeah, and they not only do they get too numb to it, it's like they get burnt out from doing this stuff all the time because it's just constant stream of bad news, it seems. But again, this is where it helps to have hobbies that are unrelated to any of this stuff, like being able to just go somewhere, dive into a book, do a video game, whatever you do that gets your mind off of it, so that when you are dealing with these issues, you can go all in and give it the weight it needs. That helps. I know it does for me, just having those other things to get my mind off of, so that when I'm writing about stuff or talking about it, I can make sure my mind is where it needs to be.
Stellar.
Yeah.
Altogether, when you are doing this with your day-to-day routine, in addition to anything else that you've selected for today, some people will block off certain time periods. Other people will just block off certain days. Do you recommend days or hours?
Personally? If you can get away with it, yeah, absolutely. For me, like I still coach at the school, like I said, I work at. And for me, what that meant is I could work during the day, I could work at night, but like in the afternoon, my time is dedicated to the kids I work with. You know what I mean?
Right.
My weekends are by and large dedicated to the kids I work with. And so I don't really do anything this atheism related during those times. But again, if you have the luxury to get away from stuff for a little while, yeah, please use it. But it's different for everybody, however people want to do it. But yeah, I mean, I know for me, it's been a chaotic couple of months. And so now I'm looking forward to being able to take a little more time off from doing this stuff full time. Hopefully readers won't notice a difference, but I know I can take it a little slower. You know what I mean? So
had there be 6 articles as opposed to 20,
that's exactly the idea. Yep.
So once again, thank you ever so much for just an hour of this, because it's
For
so
sure.
cool
Thank
to
you,
see
Cam.
anytime. So again, you're on all the socials. You're almost always just guest starring on some other podcast, and just
if
sharing
anyone
more
wants to
insights.
find me, I'm at friendlyatheist.com, or if you're listening on a podcast, you could find me at Friendly Atheist Podcast.
From what you're looking at so far, is there any light around the tunnel, or does it seem
There
like...
is. I mean, there is good stuff in the future, because I think as more people call out Christian nationalism and bad behavior in the name of religion, we're making headway to a lot of religious young people as well. And a lot of those people are going to grow up, even if they are Christian, they're going to be really disillusioned by their churches, by evangelical Christianity, Southern Baptist, Catholicism. And that's good. I mean, younger people are leaving organized religion faster than ever before, and that's good news for the future. But that still leaves us with a lot of time before that generation of people kind of comes into positions of power. So we just need more people speaking out against this stuff as much as possible.
And fortunately, you're leading those voices. So great job on your part.
Thank you.
Anytime.
I appreciate that, Cam.
Any other side projects you want to promote that are upcoming? Any podcast networks?
At the moment, if you like YouTube, you could search Friendly Atheist on YouTube and find me there as well. As for other projects, right now I'm taking some time off after some chaos, and so after that I may launch some new projects in the future. But right now I need some time to get my mind away from all this stuff for a little bit.
Take some time off, but don't back down.
Exactly. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No one does it better. So you heard the man. You know his voice. You know his insight. It's been a wonderful session with Mr. Mehta. Thank you, sir.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a